Welcome to the Johnson County Library Makerspace series, getting started with the sewing machine. The tutorial will cover the Janome Skyline S5 model. Let's start with how to wind a bobbin. Lift the spool pin. Place the spool of thread on the spool pin. Attach the large spool holder and press it firmly against the spool of thread. Pull the thread from the spool. Hold the thread with both hands and pass the thread into the guide slot, labeled with the number 1. Draw the thread to the left and forward around the thread guide number 2. Pull the thread to the back, around and under guide plate 3. To get started, wind the thread around the bobbin clockwise. Place the bobbin on the bobbin winder spindle. Push the bobbin to the right. You should be able to see the bobbin icon on the screen. At this point, you can start the machine. You may stop the machine when the bobbin is fully wound or it has the desired amount of thread on the bobbin. Once you're done threading the bobbin, use the thread cutter located here. Time to remove the bobbin to set it up in the sewing machine. To load a bobbin in the sewing machine. Press the lockout key to remove the cover plate. Place the bobbin in the holder with the thread running off counterclockwise as shown on the hook cover plate. Pull the thread to the left to pass it into the guide path marked with number 1. Continue to pull the thread along the guide path marked number 2. Thread will be cut to a proper length and held in place. Set the left edge of the hook cover plate into the opening. Push down to set it in place. We are set to thread the machine. Lift up the spool pin. Place the spool of thread on the spool pin. Attach the large spool holder. Pull the thread and pass the thread into the guide slot, labeled number 1. Pull the thread around the corner of the guide labeled number 2. Pull the thread down along the right channel and around the bottom of the thread guide. Pull the thread up along the left channel. Make sure the thread slips into the eye of the take-up lever. Slide the thread behind the needle bar. Lower the thread guide. Pull the thread from left to right under the left guide threader hook. Raise the threader slowly so a loop of the thread is pulled up through the needle eye. Slowly pull the rest of the thread through the needle eye. Let's begin with pinning the fabric. Start by lining up the pieces and find the ends of your seam. Make sure the fabrics lay nicely together and are both flat. Pin into the fabric at a 90-degree angle or on the perpendicular, meaning perpendicular to the sewing needle. Here's an example of how to pin fabric that is patterned, with the pattern facing in. Pinning a seam not only holds the layers of fabric together, but it helps to identify when one material is moving or pulling. While you are sewing, always take the time to remove pins as you stitch to avoid injury, damage to the machine, and inferior stitch quality. Selecting a straight stitch pattern on the Janome sewing machine. Enter the stitch pattern on the screen of the machine. The scissor icon will cut your thread automatically once you are done sewing. Let's get started. Raise the presser foot and position the fabric edge next to a seam guide on the needle plate. Lower the needle at the point where you wish to start. Press down on the foot control. Gently guide the fabric along the seam guide, letting the fabric feed naturally. The speed control slider allows you to increase the sewing speed by moving the slider to the right and decreasing the sewing speed by moving the slider to the left. When using the auto lock button, the machine will immediately sew locking stitches and automatically stop. Selecting a Lock-O-Matic stitch pattern 02 for the Janome machine. Enter the stitch pattern on the screen of the machine. A Lock-O-Matic stitch uses the stitch to secure the beginning and the end of a seam with backstitching. Raise the presser foot and position the fabric next to a seam guide on the needle plate. Lower the needle and begin sewing. Here's the example of the Lock-O-Matic stitch. The final stitch that we will go over is the zigzag pattern. Enter in stitch 11 on the screen. Raise the presser foot and position the fabric edge next to a seam guide on the needle plate. Lower the needle and begin sewing. A zigzag stitch is used for various sewing needs, including overcasting. An overcast stitch is a stitch used to enclose a raw or unfinished seam. Here's an example of the finished zigzag stitch. Congratulations, you have completed the Maker tutorial Getting Started with the Sewing Machine. Now that you're familiar with the basics of the sewing machine, let's try a Maker project, pillowcase with zipper. The supplies that you'll need for the Maker project pillowcase with zipper are a patterned fabric of your choice, a 12-inch zipper for a 16 by 16 inch pillowcase, scissors, and a rotary cutter, straight pins, a seam ripper, fabric pencil and tailor's chalk, measuring tape, a quilter's ruler comes in handy as well, and that 16 by 16 inch pillow. Measure and cut out your fabric to the size of your pillow. I am using a 16 by 16 inch pillow. My fabric size will be 16 by 16. The next step is to set the machine up for a zigzag stitch. The scissor icon is a nice feature. This will cut your thread once you are done sewing. To thread the needle, follow the numbers indicated on the sewing machine. Adjust the speed to the machine to a comfortable level. We are going to stitch along the border of each piece of fabric, all 4 sides. Applying a zigzag stitch on the edge of a fabric prevents the fabric from fraying. This is an alternative if you don't have access to a serger. Once you've applied the zigzag stitch to the border of each piece of fabric, you're going to place the front pieces facing in. Let's lay out the placement of the zipper. If you are making a pillowcase for a pillow that's 16 inches by 16 inches and you have a 12-inch zipper, mark 1 inch from the edge of the fabric. Using straight pins, pin your fabric together that you just marked. Place the pins perpendicular to the needle. Time to get sewing. Set up the machine for a locking stitch. Start stitching at the edge of the fabric and stop at the 1 inch marking. The program pattern locking stitch on the Janome sewing machine. Start off with the back stitch at the beginning of your seam and end with the locking stitch at the end of your seam. The auto lock button will stop your stitch and create a back stitch. Repeat this step for the opposite side of your fabric. Change your stitch pattern to a straight stitch. Adjust the length of the stitch. You are going to create a basting stitch. A basting stitch is a long, easy removable stitch that will begin at the end of the interlocking stitch. Use an iron to open and press out your seam. Remove your basting stitch with your seam ripper. Use the pointy end of the seam ripper to break the seam. Use the end with the ball to pull out the rest of the stitch. You can use tape to remove any loose threads. Lay out the zipper and place it facing down with the tab up. Pin the zipper in place in between the interlocking stitches. We are ready to attach the zipper. There are a few steps before we get started. Switch the pattern stitch back to interlocking stitch. We will need to switch out the presser foot to a zipper presser foot. Raise the presser foot by lifting up the back handle. Hit the release on the back of the presser foot. Place the zipper foot underneath the presser foot setup. Lower the back handle to lock it in place. Here's what it looks like from this angle. Here's another angle that captures lowering the back handle. Before you begin, unzip the zipper 3 inches. Make sure the tab is facing up. Line up the zipper close to the seam. Be careful not to sew into the zipper. If you have a metal zipper, you could possibly break your needle. As you approach the zipper pull, stop sewing and slowly pull up the zipper. Pull the zipper past the presser foot. Continue sewing the stitch along the zipper. You'll want to stop stitching approximately 1 inch from the end of the zipper. Lower the needle. Raise the presser foot by lifting the handle located in the back of the sewing machine. Slowly pivot the fabric and zipper Lower the presser foot and continue sewing. Repeat this step to continue a stitch around the border of the zipper. Time to test your zipper. Does it work? Okay, let's finish this pillow. Pin and place the two right sides of the fabric together. Make sure to unzip the zipper before you pin the bottom pieces of the fabrics. Oh, let's double check, make sure that zipper is still unzipped. Take the stitch pattern back to the interlocking stitch. Switch out the zipper foot to the straight stitch presser foot. Start your stitch 1/2 inch from the edge of the fabric. Continue stitching until you reach 1/2 inch from the bottom of the fabric. Stop stitching, lower your needle, raise the presser foot, and slowly pivot your fabric. Lower the presser foot and continue sewing. Repeat this step once you hit the opposite end of the fabric. The final stitch should look like this. To prevent fabric from bunching up in the corners of your pillow, make a diagonal cut along the corners of your pillowcase. Unzip the rest of the pillowcase. Turn the pillowcase right side out. Use the blunt end of a pencil to push out your corners. Grab your pillow, fold it in the center. Place it inside of the pillowcase. Thank you for participating in the Maker project. Congratulations, you have completed the sewing project.